Let's find out who we are and whom we love. With over 95 pride flags, 260 holidays, millions of genders, and even more sexual orientations, it can be difficult to find a label that perfectly fits who you feel you are inside and who you love. So, while today's episode is going to focus on helping with this, it's important to first note that you do not need labels to go about your daily life. Over 1.5 million people have come to us and watched our Pride Flags videos because they wanted to find what labels perfectly fit them. And it's not surprising. After all, most of the LGBTQ community has spent the beginning parts of our lives in the closet, hiding who we are and hiding who we love. We never really got to fit into a group when we were children because we weren't a part of the heteronormative society that was forced onto all of us. So, when we came out, we tried desperately to find our community, to find our little niche of the LGBTQ that we can pal around with, and to find a label to call ourselves. We think, subconsciously of course, that if we find a label, we will somehow be more valid or normal because there's a word to describe us now. But the truth is, we don't have to. The truth is, LGBTQ is already valid on its own, no matter what. After many years in the community myself, and many more studying the community's behaviors, I've realized our community will accept you just the way you are. You don't need a label to walk up to someone else in the LGBTQ and make a new friend. So while labels are very unimportant to the community overall, a label might be helpful for you personally. But I do have to warn you before jumping into the process that you might not find the perfect label for yourself. For example, I only love men, so I would be considered a homosexual or gay man. But my sexual attraction for a man only grows once an emotional connection is formed with him, so I'm demisexual. And I never question my gender, so I'm also cisgender. But if you were to put all of those together, I'm technically a demi-gay cisgender male, and that's an awfully long label to call myself every time I introduce myself to someone, let alone put on a button on my t-shirt. So instead, I just live my life, and if anyone needs to know, I call myself gay. As for the rest of people, they don't really need to know those aspects of who I am. The only person that does need to know is my boyfriend Michael, or on a rare occasion, my doctor. My point is that you might not find one word to describe yourself after this process. So please don't go in thinking you're going to find the miracle word to summarize everything you feel, because most people are not defined by one word. Even that demi-gay cisgender male definition of myself doesn't cover everything of who I am. My sexuality and my gender are two very small parts of what makes me who I am. With that long definition, you wouldn't know how much I love camera equipment, filmmaking, traveling, and spending time with my family, my friends, and my boyfriend. So while labels are nice to have, they are not a key to finding lasting friendships or relationships. Just by being a part of the LGBTQ community, you can make new friendships and relationships without labels. But if you're trying to figure out who you are right now, or who you love, let's go through that process to find that. To help you with this, we have 2 downloadable worksheets available on our website linked down below for free. And while you're in the description, check out our pbrmerchstore.com, a brand new website with all new merchandise on it for our Pride Season 2022, including the shirt I'm wearing, Colors So Proud They Overflow, and our brand new mugs of Drinking Homophobic Tears and another for Transphobic Tears. There's a bunch of new merchandise on there I'm so excited to launch right now in May, so thank you so much, and go check it out there. The first we're going to look at is the gender worksheet. If you can't download or print these worksheets, you can draw 2 circles on a sheet of paper yourself. Label one circle with perceived gender and the other with actual gender. Next, label the circles at the top left with male, top right with female, and bottom with non-binary, with a dot in the center of the circle for agender. The next question you have to ask yourself is, how does everyone around you look at you? Does everyone call you a boy? Does your family call you a girl? Think about how they address you. Do they use he and him and his pronouns when talking to you, or do they use she, her, and hers pronouns? Take a moment and think about this. Whenever you have the answer to that question, mark it down on the perceived gender circle. For example, if your family and friends call you a boy and use he, him, and his pronouns when speaking to you or about you, then you'll want to mark a dot next to the male side of this circle. If your family and friends call you a girl and use she, her, and hers pronouns when speaking to or about you, then you want to mark your dot next to the female side of the circle instead on this perceived gender circle. The next question you have to ask yourself is, who do you feel like you are? Sure, that is a question a gender therapist can help you with even more here, but ask yourself the question right now on this preliminary basis. Do you feel like you're a boy, a girl, neither, or do you feel like you don't have a gender at all? Maybe you feel like you're somewhere between any of these, and that's perfectly valid too. For a moment, forget about what's between your legs and what's on your chest. If you have a penis, don't define yourself as a boy just because you have a penis. If you have a vagina, don't define yourself as a girl just because of that alone. Your genitals define your sex assigned at birth, but your brain is the organ which defines your gender. Your gender and sex can be entirely different things, and that's perfectly fine. So maybe you find yourself wanting to dress more like a boy and doing more boy activities. Maybe your dot on this circle would be more towards the male side of the actual gender circle. Or maybe you find yourself wanting to dress in more effeminate clothes and wanting to do more girl activities. So your dot would be on that side, on the female side of the actual gender circle. Or maybe you want to dress in boy clothes sometimes and girl clothes other times. So your dot would be somewhere in between male and female. By the way, this is something called bi-gender. Maybe you feel like you don't want to define your gender by the normal boy or girl labels. So you would be more towards the bottom, the non-binary side of this actual gender circle. Or maybe you feel like you don't have a gender at all, and that's perfectly fine too. Your dot would be somewhere in the middle, in the direct center of this circle with agender. It's important to note here that wherever you place this dot on the actual gender circle, it can change entirely, and you can feel like you want it somewhere else tomorrow or the next day. This is something called gender fluid, meaning your actual gender changes by the day, by the hour, or by the minute. But take a quick step back here and look at both of the circles on this paper. If your dot on the actual gender circle and the perceived gender circle match perfectly, then you are considered cisgender like myself. If the dots are in two separate places on these two circles, then you are transgender. If this is the case, and let's say, for example, that you feel your gender does not change from day to day, then only one of these dots has to move. Transgender literally means the transitioning of gender perception. So, for example, let's say your perceived gender is male, but your actual gender is female. You will want to use gender expression to help your family and friends start to perceive your gender for what it truly is. Maybe you'll want to start wearing more clothes to match your actual gender, using a hairstyle to match that actual gender, or maybe even taking puberty blockers and hormones to help your body express that actual gender to others. This helps your perceived gender dot move from one place to another on that perceived gender circle. I would like to note here that wherever you feel like your dot goes on this actual gender circle, no one, and I mean no one, not even the closest family, friends, or teachers of yours, can change where your gender falls on the actual gender circle. They cannot change your actual gender no matter how hard they try. They can only change how they perceive your gender, and that's more on them than you to solve if that's a problem for them. Next, let's move on to the orientation worksheet, also available for free for download at our website linked down below. Again, if you don't have access to download or to print this worksheet, you can draw 7 circles this time on a blank sheet of paper. Each circle labeled with M for male at the top left corner of each circle, F for female in the top right, N for non-binary at the bottom of each circle, and A in the center for agender of each circle. Now label each of these 7 circles with the following titles: emotionally, physically, sexually, mentally, sensually, aesthetically, and romantically. So, before we go labeling any of these 7 for ourselves, let's first take a look at what all 7 mean. First, let's look at the first spectrum, emotionally. This relates to how much you want to hold someone close, take all their fears away, protect them at any cost, celebrate with them when they are having a great day, and cheer them up when they are having a bad day. Emotions are often intertwined with mood, temperament, personality, disposition, and creativity. Basically speaking, how much are you in love with a person's mind, and how well are your minds connected? Next is your physical love for someone. This is purely based on the love for their body as opposed to their mind. Basically, how much are you in love with a person's physical body and characteristics? Next up is sexually. While some people might combine sexually and physically, truly they are 2 separate spectrums here. This is because physically has more to do with a person's body, and sexually has more to do with the instincts, physiological processes, and activities connected with physical attraction or intimate physical contact between individuals. Basically, the physical spectrum is how much you love their body. Sexual spectrum is how much do you love the idea of partaking in sexual activity with a person. Next, let's talk about mentally. While some confuse this with emotional love, we cannot combine these 2 spectrums either. Mental love is more of an idealistic conception of what love is. It's a perception of idealized values in the other person. Emotional love is how you feel what they are feeling, but mental love is more about how much your ideas and core values are aligned. In other words, emotional is how much you are connected with them, and mental is more of how much are you connected with what love is and defining it. At number 5 is the spectrum for sensual love. Again, this is oftentimes confused with physical love, but sensual love is much different. Physical love is your love or desire for another person's body or physical attributes. Sensual love is the gratification of the 5 senses: touch, sight, hearing, smell, and taste. This could be as simple as the warm, happy feeling you have inside when you hug someone, how your eyes widen when you see someone after a long time, how you smile when you hear their voice on the other end of a phone call, how your brain starts to feel a sexual desire when you smell certain parts of their body, or could be as complex as the desire to taste their fluids, or as the kids these days might say, thirst for someone. Sensual love dives into not only the feeling you get when someone gives you a hug, but how you feel when you hug someone else. Next up is your aesthetic love for someone. This basically means how much are you attracted to their beauty. This includes everything from their style, taste, their clothing choices, makeup choices, and so on. Finally, let's talk romantically. This is your desire for a multifaceted connection to someone else. This includes the value you put on someone's personality and friendship, but it also includes your desire for someone who will go out of their way to make your day better, and vice versa. But before we go making up our chart of how we feel inside, we must remember that love comes in many different forms. How we love someone is determined by what their relationship is with us. For example, your boyfriend, girlfriend, fiancé, or spouse is considered an erotic or passionate love, and is therefore classified under the first of 4 types of love called eros love. Your best friend and coworkers you hang out with on the weekends are defined under a love of friends and equals, named philia love. Your love for your family, including your parents or children, is defined under storge love, and your desire to help random strangers and love for mankind is defined under agape love. So now let's look at this worksheet. As you're filling this worksheet out, remember it applies to all types of love. Everything from eros love to philia love to storge and even agape love. So for the circles emotionally and mentally, most people in the world would put their dot on this circle where they find themselves, somewhere near the center, near a gender. Most people can have friends, coworkers, family members, and romantic partners they love equally in the emotion and mental spectrums. So because they don't have a preference here to a certain gender, they would be in the very center of the circle. Basically speaking, if you can be friends with any gender, if you can love a family member of any gender, if you can love a stranger enough to help them on the street if they need help, and not care what gender they are, then your emotional and mental spectrums would be defined somewhere near the center, near the agender label. For other things like physically, sexually, and romantically, you might want to define these spectrums more on who you could be in a physical, sexual, or romantic relationship with in eros love. But remember, most gay people can be gay and still appreciate how good a woman looks. You can be straight and still appreciate how well a man looks. You might not want to physically do anything with them, but you can still offer them a compliment of how nice they look today. So don't just label yourself as all the way to one side automatically here. The truth is, many people are not all the way on any side of these 7 spectrums. For example, I can emotionally be attracted to anyone, but I do have a deeper connection emotionally with my boyfriend than most other people. So I'm near the center of the emotional spectrum, but with a slight emphasis on the male side. Physically, I'm only attracted to males, but I can appreciate when a woman or non-binary individual or agender individual looks good and compliment them. So I am almost all the way to the male side of this spectrum, but not entirely. Sexually, I'm only attracted to males. Mentally, I'm somewhere near the center, but again, with a slight emphasis to males. Sensually, I'm somewhere between males and agender. Aesthetically, I'm more towards males, and romantically, I'm almost entirely towards males. So even though I started this episode telling you how I'm a demisexual gay male, even on my chart you can see I'm not 100% perfectly gay, which is the only time on the show you'll hear me say that, and I guess that means that's it, show's over, we're done, I'm not gay anymore. If I was perfectly gay, all of my 7 spectrums would be perfectly male, and no attraction to anyone else in any of the 7 categories. And I wouldn't be that great of a person to hang around if you were a woman or non-binary person. But because most people only think about sexual attraction and not the other 6 spectrums, and because the definition of gay is so broad, I can define myself as gay even though my chart looks like this. Similarly, let's say for example I was a woman and I filled out my worksheet the exact same way. You might say I'm heterosexual and straight because I'm sexually attracted to males. But even then, I wouldn't be perfectly straight since not all 7 of these are perfectly 100% to males. The truth is, if everyone filled out this worksheet truthfully, no one, and I mean no one, would be perfectly straight, nor would they be perfectly gay or bisexual, pansexual, or any label at all. And if you and I filled out this worksheet 100% perfectly to how we truly feel, my 7 would not perfectly match your 7, because everyone on Earth and beyond is different. Why? Well, that's because, let's say for example's sake here, there's a million places on this emotional spectrum you can be placed on. And keep in mind, saying a million is very conservative here. In actuality, it's more like 10 million or 100 million places on each of these spectrums. But for example, and to make things as easy as possible, let's say there's only a million places you could place yourself on one of these spectrums. And you have to define yourself somewhere in one of those million places. That same thing applies to all 7 spectrums, by the way. And that means there's a 1 in 49 million chance of you and I having the same exact outcome to this worksheet. But remember, saying a million places on this spectrum is very conservative. So if we were actually talking about the real odds in real numbers here, we'd be talking more like the odds of you and I having the same exact outcome being 1 in 4,900,000,000 odds. This means whether you consider yourself straight, gay, bisexual, pansexual, or whatever label you feel is correct, if everyone filled out this worksheet perfectly, matching how they feel inside without lying at all, your worksheet would only match perfectly with one other person on planet Earth. That's because Earth only has 7.7 billion people on it right now. When the population eventually hits 9.8 billion someday, you'll have a second person on Earth to perfectly match your orientation worksheet. Now, this isn't to say there's only one person on Earth for you. My boyfriend and soon-to-be husband, Michael, doesn't match my orientation worksheet perfectly. Love doesn't work like that. You can love someone that varies on this worksheet compared to your answers. But what I'm saying is, we shouldn't rush to label ourselves or push a label that doesn't fit. Because the truth is, if we were really being honest here, no label fits anyone. No one is perfectly straight and no one is perfectly gay. But those labels are what we as a society said were broad definitions to define a group of people. And those labels help us better understand someone. For example, when your homophobic grandfather says he's straight, we know for a fact that he's not perfectly straight 100%. But it helps us to know they like an opposite gender romantically or sexually. But if we were really being honest and combined these two worksheets of orientation and gender, the odds of you perfectly matching your 2 gender spectrums and 7 orientation spectrums to someone else would be 1 in 19 quadrillion, 600 trillion people. This means if there were a galaxy of Earths out there filled with the same population of our planet Earth, my 7 spectrums of orientation and my 2 spectrums of gender would only match perfectly with one other person in 2,481,012 planet Earths. My point is that you are unique. No matter what labels you want to put on yourself, or no matter how you want to define your gender or orientation, you are so unique that it would take more than 2 million planets to find a clone of you with the exact match. You'll find someone like I did with Michael to love you for who you truly are and accept you for everything you want to become. And if you don't want to find that someone romantically or sexually, you'll still find plenty of friends who will love you and care for you the same. So if you find someone calling you weird or different for being gay or bisexual or transgender, the truth is the person calling you those things or treating you that way is equally as weird or different. You, on the other hand, while you're unique, you have a community in the LGBTQ that loves and accepts you no matter what. So just do me a favor, and while you're trying to find a label for yourself, remember you have this community. And remember, we love you no matter what label you find, even if you can't find one. And remember that homophobe in your life is not perfectly straight either. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the LGBTQ community, check out this episode right here. or subscribe for weekly episodes. And if you want to see behind the scenes and bloopers from every episode, consider becoming a member by hitting join down below. If you become an LGBTQ All-Star, you can get massive discounts on all of our merchandise at the brand new pbrmerchstore.com. As always, I'm your host, Professor Pride. Have a gay day, everyone, and bye for now.